Hi, everybody. Mr. Johnson here, and we are going to talk about our three object value drawing project. So, this is going to be about choosing objects to create your own still life from things you find around your home, drawing them, and then adding value to make that drawing really pop. So, you've got some examples to look at. I have some other information for you. So, let's jump in. So, this is your classic, right, simple three object value drawing. This uses just simple forms like I went backwards, right? You that okay? Let's pretend I didn't do that, and like I know how to use technology. So here is a cube. It just has a ball on top, and then some kind of cylinder or can laying next to it. But what this does so well, even though the objects are so simple, this shows the way that light is hitting those objects and casts shadows and has this full range of values that makes it feel so three-dimensional. So this would be a fantastic drawing. Now, it's entirely up to you what objects you choose. So if you want to use some very simple things like this, that's awesome. But take a look at how this artist has used light and value. So first of all, they've set up their objects so that they're all connecting and overlapping. That gives you an interesting, very tight-knit composition. So that's a great thing to do. The second thing is that the artist has drawn them large. They fill up the space. This is not a teeny tiny little drawing on a big piece of paper, but it uses this whole area. Now, also, not only are those objects shaded from light to dark, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, but also the background is shaded as well. That gives so much visual interest, right? Even the table surface isn't pure white. There is a little bit of gray that's been smudged on there just to give it some interest in the background. Look at how it gets black around these objects. It really makes those objects pop. So you can create an amazing drawing using the simplest of subjects as long as you really take your time to slow down, look at the light, look at the value, and create a really cool drawing. So let's look at some other options. So here are three strawberries, right? It's something totally different. First, just a ball and a box, and here you get three strawberries. So it does not matter what those objects are. But what I want to point out again is that the artist has drawn them so large. These must be 10 times actual size to fill up the page. And look at the attention to detail in here. Now, most of this detail is added with the shading. So if you look at the line drawings, right, they drew in the little leafy green parts on top. They drew in each seed, but the details of those highlighted forms and the shaded forms around those seeds, it's all done just with shading. I think this is awesome. And again, a great way to use a cool subject that could make for a very interesting drawing. So when you're choosing your objects for this project, please make sure that all objects that you choose are school appropriate. So if you have things around your house that are not appropriate for school, don't pick those things. And then I won't know. Just pick things that are appropriate. So this has a pitcher and a bowl and a salt shaker, right? So again, it can be anything. But look at how the artist has created all of these different values from white, light gray, medium gray, dark gray, and black. They've included shadows, highlights, creates a really successful drawing of really basic objects. This, I think, is beautiful for a few reasons. So there are three objects here are the coffee cup, the plate, or the saucer, I guess, and the spoon. Now they've arranged them so that it looks like it, how it might be served in a cafe, which I think is awesome. But what I love about this is the angle that the drawing is done from. The point of view is from above, looking down right on an angle. Where if this were placed in front of you at a table at a restaurant, this is the view that you might have looking down at it. That really draws the viewer in. So these other examples are all very good, but the point of view is very straight on. So that's fine and perfectly acceptable, but just think about how maybe changing up the point of view could create some interest in your drawing. So I love that the artist did that. And then look at how they've used value. Again, every part of this drawing has shading, even really, really light little tiny areas to create the shades of gray. There are no objects that are solid white. Even this tissue is not pure white. Look at the direction where the light's coming from. This is where my window is on this side. Makes this part bright white. And then there's this shadow here. There's a little shadow that's cast from my finger here. Now, this part has a little bit of texture in it. And look, it casts a shadow on itself down here. And there's this little shadow folded right here. So even something that we know is white would not be bright white in the drawing. It would have areas that are bright white, right, the highlights, but it would also have values and shades of gray. And this artist has done an incredible job at doing that. That's fantastic. This is a really cool one. They've used an old shoe and a gas tank or gas can, an old gas can, and then a vase. And they've drawn that really well. Again, a great range of values in this drawing, which I think is beautiful, from light, medium gray, dark black. It's really awesome. They've decided to include some of the background. So this is obviously set up on a table. There's a chair behind them. There's part of a wall behind them with something there. You can do that if you want. It's entirely up to you. If you don't want to include a background and you just want to focus on the objects, that's also perfectly fine. But if you would like to draw some of the scene behind it, you can. This is a good example of someone who's done that. But again, I'd like to point out that they've shaded in every area, right? Even the white surface it looks like this is sitting on is shaded in gray. So make sure, right, that this drawing is all about the shading to add value. So what are the things that you want to keep in mind when you're working on a value drawing? Great question. So the first one is the light source. So in this, again, incredible example I found by an artist on the Google. I've included a little icon for where the light source is coming from. So in this particular drawing, it's coming from the top right side. And you can tell that because that's the side where the highlights are, and the shadows are cast on the opposite side. So the light is hitting these objects, and it's hitting this side, but the back part of it away from the light source is in shadow, and then it casts a shadow on the ground right back in that direction. So you want to think about where's the light source coming from. That's going to give you an angle for your lighting, and will also help tell you where your shadows are. If you're in a space where the light is just kind of open and broad, right, like in our classroom, there are overhead lights all over the room and windows on different sides. It's difficult to get a single light source. There are multiple light sources. Now that's okay, but it's harder to create a range of values if you have a lot of different light sources. So what I might recommend is, if that's the case, either get a little lamp or move your objects, in front of a window or something, so that there's a stronger light coming in from one particular direction. And what direction that is, entirely up to you. You want to make sure that you have a full range of values. So again, here's that little value scale where the colors go from white to black with shades of gray in between. So like this example here, you have white and there's bright highlights in some of the ground here. You have black that's in this background and in the cast shadows, and then all these different shades of gray in between. You want to think about shadows. That's the darker parts of your object, right, where it's blocked from the light. You want to think about highlights. Those are the lightest parts. So that might be this little dot right here, this part in here, this section on this apple, these little circles drawn out. For highlight, you can either draw out the shape of it with your pencil and then just not shade that part in, or you can use an eraser and go back at the end and erase out little areas to make those highlights. You want to include cast shadows. Those are the shadows that the objects make on the surface by blocking the light. So those are down here. You want to make sure your drawing fills the space. Do not give me a teeny tiny little drawing in the middle of a big piece of paper. You're using a page in your sketchbook, so it's not that large, but you do want to draw the objects so that they fill up the space. And you want some of the objects to overlap, right? This bottle and this apple here overlap really in an interesting way, which is great, well, because it overlaps mostly, but a little piece of it sticks off the side. It just gives it a really cool look. So make sure that some of your objects are overlapping. So when you are shading in your drawing, there are a lot of different techniques you can use if you're using a drawing pencil or charcoal or an ebony pencil or anything like that. Stippling is value that's done using lots of dots, and the closer they are together, the darker they appear, and the farther apart they are with less pressure on the pencil, the lighter they appear. Hatching are marks that go in one direction. So these are not quite horizontal, they're kind of diagonal. And again, the closer those lines are together, darker an area appears, and the farther those lines are apart, the lighter an area appears to be. You can also shade really well with hatching by varying your pencil pressure. The harder you press with your pencil, the darker the area is going to be, and the lighter you press, the lighter an area is going to be. If you've never done that, I would recommend practicing a little bit. Scrap piece of paper or the corner of a sketchbook page. Practice using pencil pressure. Press harder to get dark areas, press lighter to get light areas. Now, cross-hatching, it's just what it sounds like. It's this hatching technique where then you go over it again in a parallel with perpendicular lines, in an opposite direction. So you're crossing back on top of the hatching. That can help fill in some spaces and create an interesting texture. There's also scumbling, which is a lot of fun. Think of it like scribbling. It's like using small circular motions to create your value. Again, the harder you press with your pencil or your charcoal, the darker an area will be. The lighter you press with your pencil, the lighter an area will be. So you want to make sure you have a whole range of values no matter what technique you use. So, oh no, I'm in the way. Move myself here. Watch out! So you want to start by sketching your shapes lightly. So when you've chosen your objects, here are three. Again, this is a great example. Set up your objects and look at them. Start by sketching them out very lightly. This way you can erase lines if you don't like them. If you draw dark right away and you erase it, you're still going to see some of those lines on the paper. It's just how it works. So start lightly. Then begin to add some details. Now, don't go overboard. Don't add every detail. It's too early on. But start figuring out where your highlights are going to be. Think about, little shapes like the caps or labels or there's the funky shapes in the glass, for example, of this jar. Then you're going to start adding your shading. But don't stop at this stage. That's because this third step does not have a full range of values. It has a few values. You need to push that so much farther till you end up with something like the fourth stage. This has that full range of values from light to dark. They've included some shading in the background, on the table surface to create interest. There are dark areas, bright highlights, and shades of gray in between. So as you're working on this, make sure that you're starting lightly, begin to add some details, start the shading, don't end there, make sure you have a full range of values. Now you can use things like your blending stump to really create nice smooth shading. That's a great tool to use for this. You can also use a little piece of a tissue or a napkin to help blend pencil or charcoal together. That's great. I don't recommend that you use your fingers to blend because oil from your skin will get onto the paper and it makes it difficult to erase or layer on top of that. It changes the paper surface and it makes it yucky. So let's watch this video of this artist here doing some shading in a really, really sped up motion. So look at, before we dive into this, these are the objects that they're drawing. They've set them up. Now, this is more than you need to do for this project, but it's just a great example to kind of give you an idea of how you can use the pencil and these tools to add shading and value to your subjects. Now, they've already done the light sketch, right? The first two steps of that four-step process that I showed you before, because there's already the light sketch of the objects, and they've already been drawn out with a little bit of detail. Now the artist is adding value. So here they're just using their pencil to add in some lines. If you notice, when they go to add in shades of gray, it changes the way he holds the pencil. So it's from the side. This is using more of the side of the point. That can give you a lot better shading like they're doing right here. Now you might think, oh, the book looks great and it's done, but guess what? It's not. It's going to keep adding more to it. Now this is sped up with a lot of sections cut out. So you're not watching the entire thing because it jumps, and gets rid of a lot of other parts. So don't think that in 3 minutes he shades the entire drawing, because he definitely doesn't. But that's okay. So he's jumped down, adding some shading here. If you've watched that beginning drawing video, they talk about shading the background edges right up to your object to create edges instead of outlines. If you notice, that's what the artist did right here. Shaded the background there to create that edge, and then adding those dark shading in here and on the bottom to hide the pencil edges. I think it's really, really cool. Now, if you wanted to smooth out the shading in this drawing, you could take that blending stump again, or a little piece of tissue or napkin, and go over it. I recommend doing little circular motions if you do that. You don't want to over blend it, though, where everything becomes middle gray, and we don't want that. We want to make sure it has the full range of values. So this artist has left all of the texture from the mark making. That's also a really cool way to do it. So if you like that look, that's perfectly acceptable. So you want to make sure, again, that you know where your light is coming from, that you have highlights, shadows, and cast shadows. You want to make sure that your objects overlap, that you draw them large so they fill the space. If you look at the piece of paper that this artist is working on, he's drawn these objects so that they really fill up the whole space. Look how he's going in with the shading. Right, he's adding values, and you'll see him going back on top to make things darker. You can also use an eraser to remove areas, make sections lighter, or add in highlights that way. An eraser is not just for fixing mistakes; it's also for drawing light areas. Right, that's awesome. That's a great tool to use for your drawing, not just for oops, I didn't want this line here. So he's adding a lot more values. We're almost done with the video, and you're seeing that the more shading he adds, the cooler the drawing looks. Everything starts coming together. Once you've only shaded one or two little parts, it's not going to look right. You need to wait until all of the objects are shaded, and it includes that whole range of values. Look at how dark, right, he's going in these dark areas. That just makes the ball of twine here really pop out because of how dark the section is underneath it. Oh, that's so cool. Good job, dude. All right, he's adding some shading into the background. This creates some interest, and it also helps you use more of the space. Wait, I wanted to see the two. There we go. So I'm going to pause this right here so you can see his drawing compared to the actual objects. Is it exactly the same? No, it doesn't matter. Is it really cool? Yes. So we're going to Dora the Explorer this right now. Which direction is the light source coming from? From the left? That's right. So the light's obviously coming in from the left here. You can see it on the toilet paper roll, on the vase especially, and it's casting its shadow on the right side. So you want to make sure that that's very clear from your objects and also in your final drawing. That's awesome. So here are your instructions. Choose 3 interesting objects to draw and arrange them. You want to make sure you can leave them somewhere where they won't be disturbed as you work on this drawing. Choose 3 objects, right? Arrange them somewhere, any objects that you want. Make sure some of the objects overlap. Start drawing lightly. Now, once you have your basic shapes complete, add the details and add shading. Use the ebony pencil, the drawing pencil, or charcoal. Those will give you much dark values. Make sure your drawing has a full range of values from white to, it says black, but it must be underneath this value scale. Well, that's lame. I should have noticed that before I started filming, but I didn't. So again, in this example, now this artist, right, has left all of these marks, right? They didn't smooth them out. Still really cool looking. So think about, right, how you want to do that. You can use the eraser to make these nice bright highlights. Have fun. Make sure that each day that you're working on this, you are posting a progress photo to your portfolio. I will give you feedback, tips, where you can improve, things you should be working on next. That way it'll help you create a really cool final drawing. Make sure that finished drawing you get a good quality photo of, crop it so there isn't any unnecessary information in the background or off to the sides, and then submit it. I can't wait to see what you draw. If you have questions, let me know, and have fun.